So hello, welcome to the third event of the NCC 30th anniversary and fourth decade conference. My name is Haruko Nakamura, and I'm the current chair of the NCC. I would first like to thank our sponsors, the Toshiba International Foundation and Japan-US French Commission for their support for those events and for supporting NCC over the years. Today is the last presentation of the 30th anniversary celebration and the fourth decade conference. But our celebration will continue with one final event, the more casual gathering at our reception next week. So Tara McGowan, NCC Executive Director, has a few announcements regarding to the event.
Yes, hello everyone. I want to welcome you as well and thank you all for coming. I know you're all probably familiar with our website and homepage, but I thought I would quickly lead you through the navigation to our events. If you can see at the tab at the top, NCC events, and when you click on that, you can choose the NCC 30th anniversary. Which will lead you to this page. And as Haruko-san just mentioned, this is our third event and last presentation event, but we still have the 30th anniversary reception coming up next week. And the important thing to know about that is that the deadline for registering is actually tomorrow. So please don't hesitate to register. I think that Haruko is going to put the registration link in the chat so you can register right away. So we are going to be hosting this on the WonderMe platform, which we were all new to. So the executive committee and my administrative assistant, Amy Ledbetter, all tried it out the other day. As you can see, you can enter into the space as an icon. And when you click on someone else's icon, then you can form circles and actually see each other and talk. So we will have a lot of people. You can mingle with different circles of people, invite people to your circle. And we think it'll be a really great occasion to meet new people and see old friends. We have invited Amy Heinrich, who I know is here today, to say a few words. She was the founding chair of NCC, and also my predecessor, Victoria Lyon-Bester, will be speaking. And Paige Cottingham-Streeter from the Japan-US Friendship Commission, and also Tokiko Basil, who all of you probably know, who is at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So I just want to also mention, we recently published this interview between Gina Gooseby and Tokiko Basil. This is a really interesting interview, which you can access on our homepage. And Gina Gooseby is a recent graduate from Swarthmore, who is interested in becoming a Japan Studies librarian, possibly. And so she interviewed Tokiko Basil about her 22 years in the field. So it's a very interesting interview and will give you a sense of the future of Japan Studies from a librarian's perspective. So I encourage you to look at that. So we'll have a lot of interesting people at the reception and speeches, as well as the announcement of our Comprehensive Digitization and Discoverability Program awards, which many of you know about and have participated in. So we're all excited to hear about that as well. And finally, I just wanted to mention that we initiated a next decade donation drive, 30 Days of Giving for our 30th anniversary. We're really aiming to get as many of our constituencies as involved as possible to show a broad base of support for NCC. So no matter how small your contribution, we're just really happy to receive some support and recognition from as many of you as possible. So please consider giving to this fund drive within the time period. So thank you all, and back to Haruko-san.
Thank you, Tara. Now I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Professor Yoshitaka Yamamoto, Associate Professor at the National Institute of Japanese Literature, NIJL, and so at the Sokendai, the Graduate University of Advanced Studies. Currently, Professor Yamamoto heads the Secretariat of the Global Consortium for Japanese Textual Scholarship, 日本古典籍研究国際 Consortium. He specializes in Sinitic literature of Edo and Meiji Japan, and is the author of Shibunto Keisei, 幕府純真の18世紀. It's just recently published, and I'm waiting to come to the library right now. Anyway, so today, Professor Yamamoto will look to the future and discuss ways for librarians, scholars, and students of Japan to nationally and internationally collaborate. Professor Yamamoto, 先生、お願いします。
Thank you so much. I'm Yoshitaka Yamamoto from the National Institute of Japanese Literature in Tokyo. Happy 30th anniversary to NCC. It's truly an honor to be part of the NCC 4th Decade Conference. And thank you for inviting me to speak today. And thank you all for coming. I was going to send you all the URLs just now, but I accidentally hit the send button earlier. So I think they're there in your chat box. So my email address is there, as well as all the links that are relevant. And so now I'll start sharing my screen. So my title today is NCC 2.0, Envisioning the 4th Decade. In the 25 or so minutes that I have, I'd like to present on how librarians, students, and researchers based in North America and in Japan might be able to collaborate and work together in the next decade from the perspective of someone who has been educated in both the United States and Japan. I went to boarding school in New Hampshire. I was an undergraduate in the US and did my doctoral work in Japan. And I'm also currently based at the National Institute of Japanese Literature, or NIJL, a public research institution that seeks to serve as a hub for librarians, students, and researchers worldwide who work with Japanese texts produced before 1900 or so. My talk today will be in 3 sections. As you can see, the word cataloging appears in every section title. I would be preaching to the choir if I tried explaining what cataloging is all about. But just in case, I went on Merriam-Webster online to check the dictionary definition, and here it is. Catalog as a noun is a complete enumeration of items arranged systematically with descriptive details. And as a verb, to make a catalog of, or to classify something such as books or information descriptively. The most important word here is probably the word descriptive. My main thesis today is that the ability to describe a book, a manuscript, a painting, or any cultural artifact as a material object is an essential skill that needs to be passed on to and cultivated by everyone participating in Japanese studies, not just by librarians and curators. Insofar as the study of texts is concerned, the Japanese word for cataloging that I have in mind is shoshichosa, which literally translates to bibliographic research, but is probably closer in meaning to descriptive cataloging. In section 1, I will be talking about how cataloging is research and how cataloging and research are inextricable. In section 2, titled Trans-Pacific Cataloging, I will briefly talk about my own experiences cataloging Japanese collections in North America. Finally, in section 3, I'd like to propose a new initiative or project that NCC in the next decade could perhaps undertake, VCCP, or Virtual Collaborative Cataloging Platform. And I'd like to thank Fabiano for helping me come up with this name for this possible future project. The idea that cataloging is an essential part of research is nothing new. In fact, my home institution, the National Institute of Japanese Literature, is an embodiment of this idea. It's a public research institution dedicated to Japanese literature and archival research, and it seeks to serve as a hub for students, librarians, and researchers across Japan and worldwide. And one of the most important types of work that NIJO does is building and maintaining online databases that enable students, librarians, and researchers worldwide to catalog and/or access Japanese sources, especially books, manuscripts, and scrolls dating from the Edo period and earlier periods, but also from the Meiji period and even later. Why is cataloging an essential part of research? Well, after cataloging materials, whether they're books, documents, or paintings, you become more comfortable with handling primary sources. You learn what to look out for, and also you become hungry for primary sources. And this hunger is perhaps one of the most powerful drivers of research. During the process of cataloging materials, you encounter texts, documents, paintings, etc. by chance, and they can widen your horizons and enable you to make unexpected but crucial connections. Cataloging should not be a solitary process because doing it as a group is faster and more effective overall. And when you catalog as a team, you get to collaborate with colleagues who can see what you don't necessarily see. Their knowledge in a certain area may be greater than yours, or even less experienced team members might be able to see things that no one else can because they're bringing to the table a fresh pair of eyes. All of the above observations are rooted in my own experiences. In 2010, I was a first-year master's student studying Edo period Japanese literature for the first time, since as an undergraduate, I had only studied modern Anglophone and Francophone literature. Fortunately, I was invited to participate in a Kakenhi research project based at Kyushu University, and the goal of this project was to catalog Edo period illustrated books at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. At the MFA Boston, while we were cataloging, I encountered this book by chance, because when you're cataloging books, you catalog what comes your way. The copy I'm showing to you on the screen is a copy held at NIJO, and the title is Soka Koromo no Ka. And if you look inside, you can see that it's a flower arrangement manual, and it was published in 1801. At the time, back in 2010, I was not planning to do any research on flower arrangement. My research was going to be on Sinitic literature as it is now. But here I was suddenly face to face with the flower arrangement manual. But when I began flipping through the leaves of this book, I found that there was a Sinitic couplet followed by a long piece in literary Sinitic prose. And the piece goes on like this. And this Sinitic prose piece turned out to be a preface by Yamamoto Hokuzan, a Confucian scholar that I had just decided to focus on in my master's thesis. This came as a complete surprise. And if I remember correctly, it was Atsushi Sato, a much more experienced graduate student in the group at the time, who had pointed out to me even before I picked up this particular copy, that there was a book containing Yamamoto Hokuzan's preface in the pile that we were cataloging together, which happened to be full of flower arrangement manuals from the Edo period. He knew that I was working on Hokuzan, and he was kind enough to alert me. This chance encounter with the flower arrangement manual led me to look more broadly at Sinitic prefaces by Yamamoto Hokuzan in other woodblock printed books, and then led me to publish an article in 2014, which became chapter 11 in my recent book. And this research was based on approximately 100 Sinitic prefaces by Yamamoto Hokuzan. And then I had another chance encounter with another Edo period work on flower arrangement. This time not while cataloging, but when I was walking around in the closed stacks of the University of Tokyo Library. And this was an essay in Sinitic prose on flower arrangement by a physician named Kashida Hokugan. It was only because I had encountered the first text, Soka Koromo no Ka, while cataloging at the MFA Boston, that I decided to do research on this Sinitic prose piece. And this research turned into another article and eventually another chapter. So in my opinion, cataloging materials may be especially helpful for graduate students in early stages of research when they're still in the middle of figuring out the contours of their research project and their research questions. During the years that I was a graduate student, between 2010 and 2016, I was fortunate enough to participate in 3 Kakenhi research projects to catalog Japanese collections in North America. Teams of researchers, including graduate students like myself, traveled 2 or 3 times a year from Japan to North America for a week or so at a time to catalog collections at the MFA Boston, the Honolulu Museum of Art, and the CV Star East Asian Library at UC Berkeley. These teams were led by scholars based in Japan, Mitsutoshi Nakano, Takatoshi Matsubara, Kenichi Kansaku, and Motoi Katsumata. Needless to say, the generous help we always received from curators and librarians at these North American institutions was indispensable. Here are some photos from the cataloging project at the MFA Boston, included in the published project report, which is available online. In addition to team members from Japan, there were also graduate students and early career researchers based at Harvard who joined us for a few days at a time. We spent all day cataloging with our laptops inside the museum, and we would eat lunch quickly and then rush back to the mountains of books every day. And we had a lot of fun doing this. The project report lists nurturing the next generation of researchers as an important goal. What I experienced was, as a master's student, I felt completely safe not knowing anything. At the time, I could not even read the most basic cursive hiragana or hentaigana. The more experienced team members were always generous with their time and knowledge. Each of us was working individually, but I was able to ask the more experienced PhD student next to me or that professor across the table anything. Although I did try to figure everything out on my own first, but sometimes it's just better to seek help. I must have participated in 20 or so of these kinds of cataloging trips to North America, and the endless conversations we had inside and outside the museum or library about bibliography, literature, or history were incredibly informative and inspiring, to say the least. I think that my experience as a graduate student based in Japan may have been unusual in the sense that a large portion of my training in descriptive cataloging took place at locations in North America rather than in Japan. But I believe that descriptive cataloging of books, manuscripts, or historical documents is part of the standard training that many graduate students in Japan receive, especially if they're specializing in pre-Meiji Japanese literature or history. And I have been wondering for some time now if there might be a way to replicate the kinds of opportunities I had while visiting and cataloging Japanese collections in North America, and also at some locations in Japan. At this time, we're still in the middle of a pandemic and traveling is difficult. But in fact, long distance travel can be expensive and isn't always good for the environment either. So here's an idea. How about setting up a platform that makes virtual cataloging possible? Needless to say, nothing can be a substitute for the experience of holding in your own hands the item, the material object that you're cataloging, Some may even say that it's absolutely impossible to catalog anything if you don't have physical access to the object. Well, I agree. You do need to have at least one person who has physical access to materials, but maybe others in the group can join not in person, but virtually. The kind of setup is what I'd like to propose, VCCP, or the Virtual Collaborative Cataloging Platform. So if you have a book or any material object of any period and a laptop and a phone, you could have team members join you remotely through Zoom or any other video conference application. You can connect your phone to your laptop and use your phone as a camera to show your book or object to your team members. There are free applications that allow Zoom to recognize your phone as a second camera. And I've used one such application before for an online workshop with my colleagues at Nigel and at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and the Honolulu Museum of Art. And all I needed to do was to get a small tripod and install a free app on my phone. If you can do this with Japanese collections in North America and have librarians, students, and researchers virtually join in from other locations in North America, as well as from Japan and really from anywhere in the world, then we would have a trans-Pacific or possibly global VCCP, Virtual Collaborative Cataloging Platform. If there's enough interest in this kind of endeavor, then perhaps NCC could help identify and select which Japanese collections in North America would benefit most from virtual collaborative cataloging. I hear that some libraries don't have Japanese collection specialists. I suspect that pre-modern materials might be more suitable for VCCP, but there are also modern materials, especially those dating from the Meiji period, that I think would be suitable for virtual collaborative cataloging as well. So what exactly would participants in VCCP do? Cataloging is a sophisticated art, and it can be as detailed and elaborate as one wants it to be. But for a platform where people with different experiences and backgrounds can come together, something simple might be good. Simple doesn't necessarily mean easy, by the way. Cataloging methods vary greatly from person to person, but I prefer the single line format where each line in the Excel file corresponds to an item. So here there are 25 pieces of information you need to record for each object or item from A to Y. This particular format was used during some of our cataloging runs at the Honolulu Museum of Art. I know that some people would prefer a much more elaborate format. I think we can all agree to disagree, and perhaps we could have 2 or 3 different formats to choose from. In any case, the most important thing would be to get students, the next generation of librarians and researchers on both sides of the Pacific involved. How do we make sure students based in North America would feel comfortable participating in VCCP? What level of Japanese would be required? These are not easy questions, but there are a number of English language resources available. On the slide, I've listed those that have to do with cataloging Japanese books and manuscripts dating from the Edo period primarily, but also from earlier periods. The wonderful online resources put together by OJA MSAG or the Overseas Japanese Antiquarian Materials Study Group. Also the catalog by Gardner with a very helpful bilingual glossary. The book in Japan by Kornitsky, and also the work by Suzuki and Tinios focusing on woodblock printed illustrated books, and the online course in English by Sasaki and Ichinohe, Japanese Culture Through Rare Books on FutureLearn. I don't know how much of these resources are being utilized by students based in North America, but I really do want to emphasize that these resources shouldn't just be used by librarians, but by really anyone in Japanese studies, as well as in other related fields in East Asian studies, comparative literature, etc. One might argue, though, that students in North America do not have strong incentives to see cataloging as an indispensable part of their education and training. Well, as far as I'm aware, there are East Asian studies librarians in the US and also in the UK now who hold PhDs in Japanese studies. So working as a librarian is, I think, a realistic career path for PhD students in Japanese studies. experience counts in the world of cataloging. The more you do it, the better. So having a platform where students can learn early on how to do descriptive cataloging would be good from the perspective of professional development too. And of course, as I've already mentioned, cataloging would benefit their research, whether they're master's students, PhD students, or even undergraduates. Taking part in VCCP would hopefully allow them to encounter materials that they may not have otherwise even known about, and also allow them to connect with other students and other scholars in North America, Japan, and elsewhere. Now, that is the beauty of virtual collaboration. How can we ensure that librarians, researchers, and students based in Japan and in other parts of the world can also participate in VCCP? A new global consortium focusing on pre-1900 Japanese texts, or Kotenseki, was founded last year in November 2020. The Global Consortium for Japanese Textual Scholarship, or Nihon Kotenseki Kenkyu Kokusai Consortium, now has 82 member institutions worldwide, 41 of which are in Japan and 13 in North America. These member institutions consist of Japanese studies departments, libraries, museums, as well as academic associations. The consortium's secretariat is at Nigel, and I'm currently heading that secretariat, working together with my colleagues at Nigel and also at all of the member institutions. The consortium has a DokuWiki website, kotenseki.org, which I think could provide some space for storing bibliographic data collected through VCCP, although I personally do not have the authority to decide if that's what the consortium should do. The authority rests with the representative committee of the consortium, made up of representatives from all of the member institutions. The consortium has just begun holding a new online study group on bibliographic terminology called Shoshigaku Yogo Benkyokai. This study group is open to anyone who is interested, including those who don't belong to the consortium's member institutions. The second study group meeting is coming up next week, actually, and we have participants, librarians, and researchers at various stages in their careers from various locations in Japan and from around the world. I would think that at least some of them, if not all of them, would be interested in participating in something like VCCP. Librarians and researchers in this study group, I think, would be very interested in learning about what kinds of Japanese materials are held at libraries and other institutions in North America. And one participant in the study group, Shinya Miyagawa, is a scholar of Edo period literature based in Japan and happens to be a good friend of mine. And for the past year or two, he and I have been discussing the possibilities of organizing something like VCCP, actually. And I know he would be interested in taking part. For one thing, he's much more knowledgeable about bibliography and cataloging than I am. The URL of his research map page is shown on the slide. There are also participants in this study group who I think might be able to join in. And I should add that a number of librarians based in North America who are the driving force behind NCC are also participating in the study group and also in other GCJTS activities. If we were to build a platform like the VCCP, then NCC could potentially help identify which collections in North America would be most suitable for virtual collaborative cataloging. And also, it would be nice if NCC could call on students and faculty in North America to get involved. Then perhaps NCC can tell, or rather can call on members of the bibliographic terminology study group of GCJTS, those of them based in Japan and around the world, to take part in VCCP, and members of NCC who represent their home institutions at GCJTS could perhaps ask the GCJTS representative committee to consider using a portion of the consortium website for storing VCCP data. Of course, we would also need to discuss what kinds of materials would be most suitable for VCCP. The consortium study group has members who are historians, and they know how to catalog historical documents, which require skills that are different from those required for cataloging books and manuscripts. There are also members, including myself, who work on not just the Edo period, but also on Meiji. BCCP could maybe focus on pre-1900 materials, which would of course include Meiji period materials as well. Copper plate printed books produced in Meiji Japan are incredible primary sources, but are still relatively understudied. There are also examples of stenciling, kappazuri, in the Meiji period, which is of course a continuation of the Edo period practice, but was used to depict decidedly modern subjects, like in the Book of Riddles I have on the slide. And so now we've reached the last slide. None of what I've talked about or proposed today represents my institution's views or those of the Kotenseki Consortium. My opinions and ideas are merely personal. And also I don't have, I'm not very well, knowledgeable, or I don't really know what the situation is like actually on the ground at libraries in North America. And I don't know if something like VCCP, how feasible it would be. And you might agree with some of my ideas, but also disagree with them and have questions about them. So I would be grateful for your comments and questions during the Q&A section of today's event. And please email me at this address, yamamoto.yoshitaka@nigel.ac.jp. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Yamamoto, for very inspiring presentation. Now we would like, I have so many questions for myself and the comment, but now we would like to move to the Q&A and the open discussion. Fabiano Rocha from the University of Toronto, and he's also he's the chair-elect of NCC, will be a moderator.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Yamamoto-sensei, for your very inspiring, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what kind of ideas people have, and I would like to hear from people from the audience as well. I have a couple of questions as well, but maybe I will defer to people first, and then maybe we can move on to mine and Haruko's questions.
Do you want me to? Can you read, or do you want me to read?
I think I can read, but I don't see anything yet. Haruko, would you like to?
We have a question from Dennis Frost.
Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I can read it now. Yes. So Yamamoto-sensei, do you think that experiences with cataloging for graduate students would give future scholars a better sense of the work that goes into creating an archive, quote unquote? Think of an article published online yesterday by AHA critiquing the tendency of historians to use the word, quote unquote, archive without really considering or even knowing how archives actually come to be. So that is the question. I wonder if you can comment on that, or if you need any more clarification from Dennis, who posed the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Did you want to say more about your question, or should I respond first and then maybe you can respond? Yeah, well, yeah, I absolutely think that, well, the concept of archive, I think, is different for historians and for literature scholars, and it's very interesting. So I've had very interesting discussions with historians, for example, and they try to preserve what they discovered, and they try to record exactly where each document was in a box or inside a box, for example. But literature scholars are a little bit more free about kind of moving materials around and rearranging things. And I think that, yeah, definitely sort of like discussing what exactly is an archive and how is it passed down through all the generations. I think that sort of discussion is much needed, and also in Japan as well. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but thank you.
No, I unmuted just briefly, but yeah, because there was an article, literally it came out yesterday for AHA, and it was about this issue of archives and how historians use it kind of lazily, and that they don't even think about the fact that archives have to be cataloged, and like the only reason you find things is because they're cataloged. So I just thought it was really on point, and I can see where your project is really kind of fits with that. I put a link in the chat for people that are interested in that article. So thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know about this article, so thank you very much. This is very helpful.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, that article was quite buzz. I meant to read it and I haven't able to have a chance to read it. Yeah.
So while we wait for other questions, Haruko, would you like to pose one of the questions that you have in mind?
Sure, I have number of
Fire
questions.
away.
Yeah, and well, quick one was the app you were mentioning about. The application of the video I think there's a lot of discussions of how, like library showing materials, how to show, and then layer books and all that kind of thing. I think many people are wondering about it, and then that kind of practice is, I'm sure it's different from here in overseas or Japan, especially using Japanese material. So one, I was curious about the app that you were mentioning about, and then I don't want to. Maybe I should stop. Maybe I'm and when I was looking at your table, Excel sheet of the field. Do you think you are gonna? I'm sure in the consortium, we started talking about, how to standardize between U.S. or overseas and Japan of this kind of field. And are you thinking about like trying to do bilingual or? Yeah, so I will stop there. I have other question, but I'm not gonna monopolize.
Oh, thank you very much for your questions. So first of all, the video or the camera application is called NDI. And if you search for NDI camera, I think it'll come up. And there might be other applications as well. So, and I didn't want to particularly sort of advertise this one particular app, so I didn't really put it on my slide. But yeah, so how to show books, and I'm not sure if libraries allow this sort of thing in the first place. I would imagine that museums have very strict rules about showing materials, even privately. And so it might be harder. This might be a harder thing to do at museums. But I was thinking that in addition to showing materials using, your phone, I think that it might be helpful to have someone take photos of the materials beforehand and then share that among the group members, the team members, so that they can kind of do their homework and then use the actual meeting time, effectively asking questions and using the camera to actually look at parts of the object that, that have maybe problems, interesting problems for catalogers. So I was thinking of like combining video and photos. And then your second question about standardizing the format. Yes, I think making it bilingual is essential. And actually, I forgot to mention that the study group and the consortium is actually going to work on that sort of thing. And we're actually trying to build a multilingual glossary of bibliographic terms. And we're going to start with English and Japanese and English, but we also have participants from China and Chinese speaking participants. So I think Chinese is also on the horizon. But standardization is definitely not going to be easy. So that's why I think that it might be helpful to have like 2 or 3 different formats and then try to see what sticks. Yeah, does that answer your questions? Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? If not, I'm going to follow up with a comment in terms of Haruko and the idea of how sometimes the handling of materials may be a little bit problematic for some of the library restrictions and guidelines that are in place. I know that because of the pandemic, for example, the University of Toronto Library's Rare Books Library, they actually adopted some new technologies and they were able to offer kind of reference services, even though people couldn't actually handle the material culture. Librarians and staff of the library would also be showing the materials via camera, but they also, I think that they actually purchase specific cameras for that particular purpose. So these things are kind of available. I just have to find out a little bit more about it. But it seems that it was quite successful when people didn't really have the ability to actually go on site to view materials. But on the same hand, it's because the staff is also trained to actually handle this type of materials. They have very particular restrictions on who can touch it and how you touch it and how you open, where you put it. So these are all things that probably it would be worth considering. And I think that the question that I had for you, you mentioned something about cataloging being a very cooperative activity. And it's very interesting because I think that the first tendency for people to actually think is that cataloging is a very solitary activity in most cases because people are very concentrated with and engaged with that particular item. But it's a very interesting concept. I appreciated your experience, but could you like to expand a little bit more about the whole idea of you know, this kind of mentoring opportunities that people who are very experienced with the subject matter and using that to produce cataloging and bibliographic data. If you can talk a little bit more about it, it can be drawn from your experience or others who also have recently worked on things.
Thank you so much for your question and for your comments as well. And yes, I think following library guidelines is definitely of utmost importance. And that's definitely something that I didn't really cover in my talk today, but something very important. And the collaborative aspect of cataloging was very kind of was really naturally part of my experience. But there is also a solitary aspect to it. I understand because I had to catalog a group of books at Osaka University recently. And even though I worked with a group of graduate students who were very helpful, in the end, I had to kind of, you know, go over their work and make sure everything was in place. But at the same time, I did have help from other people at Osaka University as well. And so it was very collaborative in the end. And it's definitely more helpful to have, you know, multiple pairs of eyes, just because a single pair of eyes can't catch everything. And it's impossible to be knowledgeable about every single area that's represented in a particular collection. And so you definitely need to have at least 3 or 4 people, I think, in the group. Yeah, so that's kind of my experience. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Otherwise, Haruko will have to ask all the questions that she has prepared.
So I'm sorry if I'm, if anybody asks, if anybody has question, you can just come in and then, you know, mute yourself. But another question or maybe comment about this platform I was thinking is like you touched lots of different, at the end you touched lots of different materials. You mentioned, like, you know, pre-Meiji, I mean, I'm sorry, the Meiji period material, which is always forgotten in the library and then sit in a corner of the stack where it's very hard to discover. and then those kind of things. But do you think it's if we can divide by people, this platform by people, by subject, subject, I'm sorry, like even either period or because I just think some people who are, the historians who might be interested in like Komonjo, for example, and then, others might be just interested in Meiji materials, government, like, Naikaku materials for that, and I think in that way, maybe we can have more participants in a way.
Yes, thank you for the very important question. Yes, I think it would be helpful if the collections allow us to, have sort of periodical kind of divisions or ways to organize groups according to different periods or areas of research. I think that would be ideal. But at the same time, I also want to emphasize the importance of cataloging an entire collection, no matter what it's about. Usually, though, collections tend to have certain tendencies. So there are collections that contain a lot of, government documents, for example, whereas other collections might have medieval manuscripts or, a lot of illustrated books from the Edo period. And there are definitely sort of like different skills associated with cataloging, medieval manuscripts versus Edo period wood block printed books. Those are very different media, and but personally, I haven't had a lot of experience cataloging medieval manuscripts, unfortunately, but I wish I had had that experience, even though I work on, Edo and Meiji. So I think that it would be helpful to respect what, the collection first, and then maybe if you describe what the collection is generally about or what it contains, then you can have people who might be interested join in. But I think it would be helpful to just catalog an entire collection as a whole. Yeah, but this is just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I understand. That's exactly your serendipity, the way, even though it's so different from your topic.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then expand your knowledge. Yeah,
and it's the fun of it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi,
Yes.
this is
Hi.
Chiharu Watsuki. I'm sorry. I just, it's kind of hard to write, in chat.
I know. I have a problem of chat, like
So
in chat.
I think this is, I just quickly, I'm Chiharu Watsuki. I am a Japanese cataloger at Princeton. And it's just a comment. I think the idea of collaborative cataloging is a great thing, especially for the special materials like rare books, because we know like yourself, professor, and then some other of your colleagues, catalogers in Japan have must have a lot more knowledge about certain subject areas or whatnot, and than us, and then somehow we can share knowledge, collaborate. Like when we have questions, if there is a place that we can ask, that we know where I can reach out, that would be great. Because here's one thing, recently, Setsuko-san, Noguchi-san, our Japanese bibliographer, she purchased this rare books quite a while ago, but this is about Buddhism. And then she found out is that the reading of that title, which I don't even remember, and it has an extra reading, not just one reading, but she found out in a catalog that reading was not provided. So somehow, catalog needs to be fixed. But for myself, I can do the cataloging, but there's no way of knowing, so much about Buddhism or other subject areas, especially, the older materials. So in a sense, it's great that if we know, oh, here's a group I can ask, and maybe there's someone else who knows it can help me with this. So I think that is a great idea. And thank you for your lecture. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind comments. Yes, it would be definitely helpful for me to, I think, if I could, connect with other librarians and scholars around the world. And I do want to emphasize that there are, of course, in terms of the number of people, there might be more, specialists in Japan, based in Japan, but I do want to emphasize that there are specialists who are, very knowledgeable about many things outside of Japan as well. And I think that, students and scholars in Japan, inside Japan, would benefit greatly from working with scholars and students based and librarians based in other parts of the world. So I think it's going to be a win-win situation if we can, set up something like this. Yeah,
I truly agree. And we are
Maybe.
really becoming less and less like
yes,
fewer catalogers, and it's very difficult to get it, hire a new person when someone retires or something. But the books keep coming. And of course, we have to be a kind of multitasker and have to do everything. But we don't know everything. So I think this is a great way, especially the smaller libraries who have nice collection, but then don't really have any specialists. But if they know there is a place that they can reach out, that would be great.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chihara-san. Haruko, I know you have your hand up, but
No,
Amy would like to
actually-
make a comment.
Yeah, Amy needs to make comment, but
Yeah.
I have somebody from public space cannot speak out, so she sent it to me directly, so I will read it later. But Amy, go ahead.
I just have two comments. I'll try to be quick. One is that, as you know, and one of the guiding principles of NCC when it was founded was to create national collections. So instead of thinking about doing a whole collection of a specific library, if you divide it by subject matter, for example, and spread out the work and the cooperation and get a national collection in a particular subject matter, that would be really helpful to scholars. And I had another thought, but I lost it. So I'll wave if I regain it.
Okay,
But I thought your talk was indeed. Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much.
thank you. Do you wanna respond to that? And
Well,
I'll
just quickly, yes. I think the issue of coverage is so important, and I was thinking enough about that, but that's a very helpful perspective, and thank you so much. And I'm sure there are lots of small collections that might, fall through the cracks if we just concentrate on a few, collections, few larger collections.
Yes,
So
and
thank
we
you.
call them hidden collections now.
Yes. Thank you.
Haruko?
Yes, so okay, this is from Mary Gilstad, and she's in the public space, so she can't say things. So I'm just gonna read it. Dr. Yamamoto said he wasn't sure how feasible BCCP would be for various collections in North America because he doesn't know about the facts on the ground. And I was wondering what needs to assess feasibility. Can graduate students at or near various collections here in US help, like small projects? That was a question.
Thank you. This is exactly something that I also would like to know more about. And one thing is clear, though, that I would really like graduate students in the US and Canada to participate, if at all possible. I'm sure they're very busy. They have lots of things going on, but yeah. But the issue of feasibility, I really need to ask all of you think, at NCC. So I don't know if that addresses the question, but yeah, but thank you.
I'm inspired to organize something.
Yes. Are there any further questions for Yamamoto Sensei? We have a couple of minutes left. Maybe I just have one more. I like your idea of a pilot project and engaging NCC to actually identify some of the collections. And I think some of the work has already done by the Cooperative Collections Development Working Group that we could probably like base on. But I also was thinking of collections that are not identified, like small places. Sometimes there's individual items that people don't really know what to do about it. And I was wondering if you could kind of include in your platform a space for people to bring random items, like I need help with this. Would this group be able to help? And I think that maybe it's a system in place because sometimes things require research. So maybe submissions can be sent in advance of the meeting time and then people could work on. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that.
Well, that's such a wonderful idea. And maybe that's where we should maybe start, if we can start doing something like this, because I'm sure people have, individual items they want help with. And actually, my friend Shinya Miyagawa and I were actually talking about exactly this sort of thing, where we have a Zoom session and people can bring in their materials, and they can send in questions beforehand. And so maybe this is something that we can start doing soon,
Yeah.
maybe.
Thank you for considering. And I see there's a comment on the chat. Great point. Many libraries don't have catalogers who have expertise of pre-modern materials, from Keiko Yokotakarta from Michigan. Thank you. So if there are no other burning questions, and if Amy hasn't remembered what she was going to say, I think I'm going to pass it back to Haruko, because we are at time and we're just going to go maybe a couple of minutes over for some final remarks and announcements.
Thank you so much. And then also I'm just gonna, because it's 6 right now, so I'm gonna talk. I'm just gonna mention about the reception. Again, if you sign up first 100, you get $30 Google Eat, and you can come and then enjoy. We also have the feedback form. So if you can fill that, that would be great. And again, tomorrow's reception is the deadline of registration is tomorrow, right, Tara-san?
Yes, that's right. So you really need to register today if you can.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then, sorry, it's just 1 minute past, but thank you, Professor Yamamoto, and then thank you, Fabiano, and then thank you, everybody, for coming. Hopefully, I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.
We look forward. Thank you. Bye, everyone.